I imagine that right now you're feeling a bit like Alice. Tumbling down the rabbit hole?
You could say that.
I can see it in your eyes. You have the look of a man who accepts what he sees because he is expecting to wake up.
Welcome to Team Rabbit Hole Edition 263 with C. Lee, Deep Sea Tarot. We shall be talking about mysticism, tarot, being psychic, and of course, one of the most important elements, water. Welcome and well met.
Thank you. It's such a pleasure to be here.
I don't know you for shit, but that's going to change briefly, clearly. I'll get into that in a second, but something we do on these podcasts is to take the episode number, which in this case is 263, reduce it numerologically, which in this case would be 11, but that becomes a 2. So we have the High Priestess card. I offer up the mysteries of life. The High Priestess is about trusting your intuition, listening to your inner guides, understanding yourself better, listening to the music of the universe, and allowing creative ideas to germinate. Raphael, what card are you pulling?
Which
We're
one?
both gonna laugh
So-
because of its Sun card. He pulled Sun for the last 3 episodes, and he's shuffling. So
I
I'm
just
not really
started
sure
with
what to
this, so I mean, I don't know. I was thinking like maybe give me a cue or something when to stop shuffling. I don't know. So maybe I can short circuit this. Jim?
make. Oh, I think.
All
I'm late
right,
for
I'll
her.
just take this
Yeah.
one. Oh, well, it's
Word.
almost. See, the synchronicity continues. This is the moon.
Oh,
Bada bing.
And
So you
yeah,
got the High Priestess
I don't
behind.
think we can get a better match for this one. So
So between the moon card,
beautiful.
I mean, if you want to spit off a little about that, Raphael, you can. If not, that's all good too.
I'm just surprised right now because I was totally gonna say no, this is certainly a water card, but actually I'm seeing it's an earth element, at least the main association. But which is interesting. I didn't even know that. Did you know moon is an earth card
I thought it was
elementally?
Pisces.
Well, these associations are Neptune, Poseidon, so we have the water, Vishnu, and Kepra. And yeah, the other symbols I can't find right now. But yeah, inside imagination, dreams, also hidden enemies, danger, deception, occult forces, illusion, and hysteria. So, both sides of Neptune.
Lunacy, but of course. So
Yeah.
I'm wondering, see, between the High Priestess, this kind of esoteric hidden reality, and that moon card, very resonant still. What syncs up for you? What's popping?
Oh man, this whole experience of getting on the podcast has been so synchronistic from the very first moment. And the fact that today's episode is an 11 number, that happens to be my birth card, Justice, which does boil down to the High Priestess, which I happen to have this image tattooed on my arm, which is the High Priestess card in the Spacious Tarot, which is one of the decks that I really enjoy working with. So I just think that's really perfect. Obviously, the High Priestess also has a strong correlation with the moon. And my dog's name is Luna. So I think it's all
Popping on
very
all fronts.
synchronistic. Yeah, it
100%.
all just, I'm like, of course, that all makes perfect sense.
It does. With Jupiter and Pisces right now, I mean, I think we're going to get a lot of water energy. And I know I'm not going to give you like a full chart reading, but we'll look at your chart in a second. You are a Virgo sun and moon, but you do have a grand water trine, which is dope. And a kite ultimately in your
Do you
whole
maybe,
chart.
Jim, before we mention this, want to explain right away
Mhm.
what that means? Because it sounds
All
really
right.
cool. Sounds like some mystical ability
So,
in a role-playing
it's
game,
whatever.
but can you talk about it?
I'll show. I mean, I don't know if you guys could see it. You can't. Barely because of the glare of
Barely.
technology or whatever. Basically, when you have a trine, it's like you'll see a triangle. You actually have a kite, so there's a triangle on top of that, like making a kite. It's when I'm trying to think if it's 120 degrees or what. Now this is where math fails me, but the point is, A trine is when you're getting the same element hit from three angles, a triangle. So in your case, you'd be having Jupiter in your north node and Pluto in Scorpio, trining Mars in Cancer, which I actually have too, psychedelic, and then all the way down to Saturn in Pisces. So it makes this, it basically, I mean, you're psychic. Let's just put it that way. I know you're an Earth sign, so you probably are more organized and grounded. That helps. You're not just like in the lunacy bin, ironically. But you're going to be hearing voices. You're going to be tapping into magic. You're going to be having pretty intense drug trips, that kind of thing. I don't need to go off onto it long, but basically, it's not like it's uber rare. Kite's pretty rare. You have a kite, but it just emphasizes the fact that that's a very strong element in your reality, water. I mean, I don't have your full chart here because you took a screenshot, but if you were to look at on astro.com, that's Astromatrix. I use that too because I love Astromatrix, but it glitches out a lot, so it feels like a bunch of millennial Russians made the app or something. I'm like, what is happening? Like they're on it, but not quite. But on astro.com, you can see there's a little quartile between the kind of bullet points like Sun, Moon, Mars, Mercury, and all the aspects. There's a little what's it called? A rubric of the elements and kind of all the major planets where they would be, as well as your modalities, which are cardinal, fixed, and mutable. I'm rambling. I can't see that, but anyway, a lot of jargon at you at once. But yeah, basically, she's magical. Let's just put it that way. She's very intuitive and very creative, emotional, passionate. Whatever cups energy, water energy. So like I said, I don't know you from Adam or Eve, but we had Neon Felicity come on many moons ago, and he is somebody that I barely know. It's kind of an internet friend. At some point, he was like, "Oh, come out to the West Coast. There's a festival. You want to volunteer? I've heard you've never been to a festival." And I was like, "Sure." And then I did that for a few days and did my first liquid acid there, and it was a lot of fun. Not a very big festival, Orcas Island. But I digress. The point is, he at some point hit me up and was like, "Oh, I met this girl, and she was pulling cards or whatever you were doing at a festival. I don't know how he knows you." And he suggested we get you on. So many months ago, I was like, "Come on!" And between existential crises on my end and scheduling conflicts in general, we've been kicking the can, but here we is. So it's happening.
Yeah.
So we can kind of, I typically like getting to kind of, I mean, even if I was best friends with you, I'd be like, tell us your story. Like, let's figure, you can start as, what kind of culture you grew up in and how life was when you started turning on to magic and mysticism. Anything, however you want to bite that apple, you can go for it.
Yeah, I'm happy to. I'd love to first just say a little something about Neon Felicity and the
Yeah.
way that that all synchronistically came together. So I met him at Still Dream Festival this last summer where I was teaching my very first tarot workshop. And I was also camping with this beautiful group of people called the Serendipitous Circus. They're flow artists and performers, and they had like different dress up days for every day. And Sunday, the day that I was doing my workshop, happened to be Through the Looking Glass themed. And I am a huge Alice in Wonderland fan. I've got a massive tattoo on my thigh, all dedicated to Alice, and I was dressed up in full Alice garb,
Regalia.
teaching this workshop, and we had like a mad tea party afterwards. And so that's what I was wearing when I met Neon. And when I connected with him later on, he was like, "Yeah, I know about this podcast. You should come on." And when I found out that it was called Team Rabbit Hole, I was just like, "Well, isn't that the most synchronistic thing ever?" And actually, when I was looking at my like horoscope and the astro for the day this morning, um, it said something about how the moon is in Gemini and this is a perfect time for diving down rabbit holes. So I was like, perfect. It all
Amazing.
lined up really synchronistically. And that's how I really know when I'm in the right place is when those little nudges from the universe are all pointing in the same direction. So
I've
I
never
thought that
actually
was
read
cool.
Alice in Wonderland. I'll be honest. It's not. That's not where this. In a sense, okay. So long story short, and it's very brief. At one point, I was growing weed in Fort Collins, and I was isolated, pretty hardcore, and I started eating acid once a week. and waking up like pretty hard in 2013. I was like, holy shit, I see astrology, I see tarot, what the fuck. And then it basically I was just like starting to make hashtags that were kind of weird because I was tired of people posting up about food selfies and just weird shit that didn't matter to me. And I was just like, oh, here's a cool Ram Dass quote or whatever, Terrence McKenna quote. Um, and so the idea is like we're group. I mean, I'm an 11th house cinnamon Gemini, so Aquarius in Jupiter, so very kind of a royal we energy. So we're all a team, and we're definitely going down a rabbit hole post 2012. I don't know how you feel, but it feels like in a Terrence McKenna kind of way, we've kind of tripped a trigger, a cosmic trigger. So that's kind of where the origins for that goes. But it also obviously ties into Morpheus's little statement, which we used in a remix for the intro. Raphael's scrounged it up. It's funny that you mentioned Alice in Wonderland. I mean, I'm a Disney junkie personally. Like, I grew up on that shit pretty hard. And that was one movie I would watch occasionally, but it just didn't hit me in the same spot. Cheshire Cat's pretty dope, but otherwise I was just like not into it. And I've never read the books. And we actually had a girl named Molly right on being like, "Oh, this is all associated with like pedophilia and like weird shit." And I was just like, "Oh, well, I didn't know that." So that's a long rant. But the Alice in Wonderland motif isn't one that is like, I mean, I guess I'm subconsciously channeling it or whatever's going on, but that's not like the point for me. Before we go too far into your own story, I'm just kind of curious what, like, you're enough into it to fucking ink yourself. So what do you know about the book? Or I'm pretty sure the guy was like writing it about his niece or some shit, and he was giving her like
Um,
laudanum or something
oh
crazy.
yeah.
Yeah.
I know a lot about all the history of Alice. I've read both books. I know about Alice Little, who is the real woman that or girl at the time that the books are made after or inspired by. And there is a lot, like you could go down that rabbit hole pretty deep. There's definitely questions about what kind of substances, if any, Lewis Carroll, or Charles Dodgson, as his real name is, was on. He did have an affinity for hanging out with children. He did have an affinity for taking photos of young girls. And back then, they didn't have as many stigmas about modesty as we do now, especially in photographs. And so there is quite a collection of photos that he took of Alice and her sisters and her friends in various stages of undress. So that's where like all of the pedophilia questions come in. The books are amazing. They're very creative, very fantastical. Actually, the sequel, Through the Looking Glass, is a chess game. And at the beginning of the book, he puts out all of the moves that the characters take so that you can actually play the game as you read the book, which is a really cool thing. He was, I believe, a mathematics professor, so he had a very wild mind. I just relate to that story very deeply because I've always felt curious, curiouser and curiouser, as the books say. And there are just so many quotes from that book that I really deeply resonate with. The one that I chose for my tattoo says, "It's no use going back to yesterday because I was a different person then." And
Mhm.
that's really something that I live by because I do believe that I'm changing every day and looking back isn't really an option. So, yeah, I could go as deep into that as you would like, but
Well, that's
that's
funny.
like,
I was just like, I don't know what the connotations are, and I've never read the book. I prefer the Disney animation to anything that Johnny Depp was doing, or whatever. I didn't even see that movie. I can't even say if it's good or bad. Some things I'm just smug about, I guess. Um, all right. So ironically, you said I don't even look back. Let's look back, shall we?
okay, yeah.
Kind of tell us where you're growing up. Are you a West Coast kid? Were you raised, hardcore Protestant? Like, where are you coming from, and like, how did you get to where you are, basically? And you
Yeah,
can be as long-winded
absolutely.
or short-winded as you want to be.
So, I was super blessed to have grown up in Lake Tahoe. So I kind of grew up right on the border of Nevada, California. Both states are very close to my heart and had a huge influence on who I am, especially growing up in a place with clean air, clean water, I went to a really good school. I was very privileged to have had that childhood. Anytime people learn that I'm actually from Tahoe, they're like, "What? Like, you're from there? Like, you're so lucky." And I
You're a
definitely feel
local?
that. I know, really. Um, yeah, so I was really lucky in that sense. My family was very Christian, so my introduction into spirituality was through Christianity and the Bible. I believe I got my first Bible when I was 6 years old and really got into the faith on my own in middle school. I was very, that was like where my social life was. That was what I was really passionate about. And so that kind of formed the foundation for my spiritual knowledge. And it wasn't until about high school that I started questioning what I was reading and looking deeper into the stories in the Bible and finding those places where it didn't make sense. So I'd be happy to share a little bit more about that journey. I have
Oh,
a
for sure.
couple key,
I'm
like,
I'm I'm a Christian still. I was raised Protestant, and my grandparents actually helped found Tim Keller's church in Manhattan. So I'm coming from like hardcore. I mean, we could talk about DMT trips and weird shit. It's like Christianity is very much part of my psychedelic experience still. And when I got a psychic reading,
interesting.
they were like, "You were in a scene walking with Jesus," and all this shit. I'm like, "What?" So I'm not against it in any way. So don't feel bad. Like you're not proselytizing me or Raphael. He's kind
Yeah,
of above it all sense. He's the Cheshire cat or the caterpillar in a weird way. But yeah, tell us. I mean, I remember very distinctly like Genesis like 5 something or 1:5 or something being like the Nephilim being like, "Yo, what's that about? Like, this is a serious rabbit hole, and no one's addressing
yeah.
this. Like, what the fuck?" But yeah, the conch is yours.
Yeah, so the first one of the first like encounters that I really had with like communicating with God came when I was very young. I had a really hard time sleeping at night when I was a kid. I had a lot of fear that like if I was gonna fall asleep, something terrible would happen to my family. And my mind, I don't know why, but my mind went ranged everywhere from like monsters to like bears attacking to us to wildfires to murderers. Like I really just believed that anything bad could happen if I went to sleep. And so I would stay up at night thinking about all of these horrible things and having a really hard time getting rest. And so I had my Bible, and I remembered my mom telling me, like, if you're ever scared, open your Bible. And so one night, I think I was sleeping in a house that wasn't my own. So my fears were like extra loud. And I turned to my Bible and I flipped it open. And I flipped open to Proverbs, I believe it was 24:3. I could be getting those numbers mixed up, but it essentially said, "When you lie down, do not be afraid. When you lie down, your sleep will be sweet. Have no fear of the ruin that overtakes the wicked, for the Lord is your guide and he will protect you." And I was
Props
like,
on memory. Jesus Christ, that was really good.
it
I
was
was like, I
it was
couldn't
a really
do that.
big turning point because after
Yeah.
that night, like I had no trouble sleeping. I was just like, okay, I'm fine. I don't have to worry. And that was my first encounter with like intuition, divination, essentially, because that was what do you call it?
Bibliomancy, yeah.
Bibliomancy.
Yes,
I got you.
bibliomancy. So that's essentially bibliomancy, and that was the first encounter I really had with that happening. So fast forward a little bit, I was like 12 years old, maybe a little younger, and my best friend, my neighbor down the street, Phoebe House, she and I started playing this game that we called Magic, where we would go to imaginary worlds in our mind and encounter imaginary animals and have adventures together
It's like
in our
Dungeons and
mind.
Dragons for American Girl dolls or whatever.
And yeah. And I really wrestled with my conscience about this because I thought that I was like following the wrong path or that like God didn't want me to do that. And so I remember telling her one day, like, I can't do magic anymore. Like, I need to be a good Christian girl. And I
Not
just
going in
like
the wardrobe. It's off.
stopped doing it
Okay.
completely. And that's like one of the regrets that I have because had I continued down that path at that age, I really would have had the chance to develop my intuition and my ability to, I mean, I could be astral traveling by this time, things like that, but I kind of had to start over because I really believed that that was not in accordance with God's will for me. And that was my main source of validation,
Like a
basically.
value set, yeah. Just for the
Yeah.
record, I mean, looking at you have a sun and moon in Virgo, which is opposite your Saturn, which is all about like structure, karma, rules in Pisces. So your sun opposite Saturn, you, and it's in Pisces, so it's about spiritual structure, spiritual truth. And given the fact that you have a North Node and Jupiter in Scorpio, you probably are naturally transgressing in a sense. Like taboos are not terribly crazy to you, but you're going to have that opposition where you're like, who I am is going against the spiritual rule. So
Yeah.
if I mean that might be a whole lifetime of that process, just so you know.
Oh
don't
yeah,
don't
no,
worry.
interestingly enough, I've been journaling since I was very young, since I was about 6 years old, and I still do. So that's like 2 decades of my life written down. And I'm actually just now, for the first time ever, taking the journey of like reading back through those journals and revisiting that part of myself. And I wrestled with that so hard when I was a kid. Like, my journals are full of, am I a good person? As I'm like 11 or like 7. Like, yeah, like, why am I worried about my existential
It goes with the
value at that
territory.
age?
It goes with the
Yeah,
territory of Christianity. So it's like you're going to hell unless you get it right, or whatever. That can
totally.
kind of fuck your psyche up. And it's ironic because, like I said, I would never proselytize to people or whatever, but it's like I think there's a lot of value with the Christ idea, and like it might have been very historically important, et cetera, et cetera. But I don't like. I mean, usually with pagans, I sound like a crazy preacher, and then with Christians, they're like burn him at the stake or whatever. So it's just like I think you kind of probably have a similar reality tunnel, maybe.
Yeah,
I didn't mean to interrupt you though.
absolutely.
And
No, you're
side note, as
fine.
a Virgo sun and moon, no shit, you fucking take notes in the form of journaling. It's like, of course. And the structure of Saturn in Pisces is gonna be like you should be dream journaling. Like you should be
Yeah,
documenting your life because you'll look back and be like, that was a whirlwind, and I am such a different. It's like metamorphic rock. It's not going to stay the same.
yeah,
You are an Earth sign, but you are very transmutational just naturally. Anyway,
right.
keep going. I didn't mean to
All
cut you
that
off.
mutable energy completely. So that's been really interesting to kind of see that journey laid out in my journals. Yeah, so around high school, I mean, when I was in middle school, I was very, very much Christian. I went to my first Christian music festival. I spent my days at youth group. I'd like to mention that I was also very overprotected. I didn't have a whole lot of freedom growing up. Um which bless my mom's heart, she just loved me and wanted to keep me safe, but it
Just trying to raise up a child in the way they should go,
yeah,
basically, or whatever. And
exactly.
it's like
So it was
you tried.
very I was a voracious reader my whole life because that was like where I got to live out the adventures that I was dreaming of. Um and so that's where I kind of found the place that I fit in was in the Christian religion and in youth group and stuff like that. But then it was like in high school, one day that feeling that I had of like God always being with me just kind of went
Evaporated.
away.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it was so weird because and I was like, Where is it?" And I was still going to church, still going to youth group, and just not feeling this connection that I had felt. And it was also at the same time that I was like really starting to read into the Bible and seeing what made sense and what didn't add up in my mind. And so I was like, all right, well, if this isn't working anymore, like what else is there? And I read this book that was very influential for me at the time. It was called Love Wins, and it was by a an author and a youth group preacher named Rob Bell. And it was essentially a different perspective of the Bible based on the language. And he essentially said that, hell wasn't a thing, that we were all destined to reach heaven, and that heaven was actually something that we would bring down into earth. And he backed this all up by different translations of the things in the Bible. And that really struck a chord within me and like caused a different way of looking at spirit.
The
So,
sacred texts, as they say.
yeah,
It's funny. I don't know much about Rob Bell. I'll just say really quick. Some of his analysis is stuff like, okay, the idea of hell is like Gehenna, which is like the trash pit of Israel. So it's
yes,
like a really bad vibes place, or the
yeah,
sulfur lake of fire. That's a Greek kind of transliteration of ideas because they were obviously, doing the whole Septuagint in Greek and Aramaic and Hebrew or whatever is going on there. So yeah, little. I didn't mean to cut you off, but little ideas like that where uh, it's very. I don't remember how universalist it is or whatever, but at some point, similarly, it's like, why am I? I was raised a Calvinist, so it's like, get this shit straight. Oh my God, like you got to, there's only an elect group of people. Everyone's going to hell. All this stuff. And at some point, I was like, I'd rather focus on the Isaiah prophecies, like where it's like, the New Jerusalem and everyone's jamming in their own vibes, but we're all like understanding of like namaste at a Christian level or whatever.
yeah.
I didn't mean to interrupt you, but yeah, Rob Bell's kind of a exegetical interpretation is taking the he's assessing it that way, where it's like, look,
Yeah.
we've made a mental image, but if you start deconstructing it, it's very culturally relative, I guess you could say.
Yeah, so that changed the way that I looked at this faith that I had grown up with. And when I reached college, I took a religion class because I wanted to learn about all the other paths that were out there, all the other faiths, and that was very informative for me. And I kind of decided, like, okay, well, I'm not a Christian. I'm not a Buddhist, but I am spiritual and I have a connection with something. And so I'm going to figure out what that is. If I had to put a label on it, now I would probably most identify with pagan because I feel like that's where my ancestry lies. And I do find a lot of comfort and familiarity in living in accordance with the wheel of the year. I don't necessarily like have faith in any sort of deities, but I've always believed in fairies my whole life. And so that's like where I feel the most pull and what kind of guides my relationship with the earth around me. I think one of the biggest there's a few things about Christianity that I'm really like I can't vibe with, and I'm
Right.
happy to share those here. The first, the idea of original sin. I can't imagine, like, if I ever had a kid saying, "You were born flawed, and you have to live your whole life making up for your inherent flaws in order to be accepted and not go to hell." Like, I really do believe that we're all perfect just the way that we are. We all have divinity within us, exactly as we are. And I think it was a very damaging idea for me growing up and brought about a lot of shame that I've been working through in the past years. And I also think that it's easy when you're a Christian to kind of like forget about this planet that we're on
Oh
and
yeah.
put all
You're
your
like, let it
focus
burn. We're going to heaven.
into heaven. Like, oh, it's all good. I'm going to be in heaven someday. So, yeah, it doesn't matter. Like, I really do believe that God is in everything, in all of the rocks and the plants and the animals that are on this planet. And in connecting with nature, we connect deeper with ourselves. And I think that's a really important thing. And I think it's something that more pagan spirituality encourages. Um,
It sucks to
yeah,
be
so those
stewards,
are
but
a
a lot of
couple of
people
the
don't
big
follow
ones.
the rule. They're like, whatever, let's just vote
Yeah,
Republican and blow the world up or whatever. So,
yeah,
I mean, whatever. It is what it is. Yeah, there's a lot of discontent with Christianity. I think um, it might have been I forget who it was. Um, the guy who talked to animals, Saint Francis of Assisi. He was like, preach the gospel, preach the gospel, preach the gospel, and if you have to use words, do it. And one other little dumb trivioid of Christian funniness. Saint Augustine, the guy who like really had a big impact on Christian thinking, he was a pagan for a long time, and he was having an existential crisis, and basically was like, "What the fuck? I don't know what to do." And he practiced bibliomancy. Basically, this girl out in the alleyway or something, he heard her saying like "Legate Tolle," which is like pick it up and read it. And so he picked up the nearest book, which is the Bible, opened it, and it's like, you got to convert or whatever. And he's like, all right, I'll do it. So he had a kind of a reverse version of your situation. But
Oh, wow.
yeah, life is crazy like that. I didn't mean to cut you off. I'm just like, if I don't say this, I won't say it. So I'm going to interrupt you for a second. Anyway, so you started, what was your major in college? Out of
I
curiosity.
was I was a humanities major, and it took me a long time to get there. I started out doing, I think, psychology, and then I was like, no, 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 no. There's way too much, like,
Science. It's too
yeah, science, too much
practical.
science in that. And then I wanted to be a journalist, and then I was like, oh gosh, like, I'm not going to be manipulated into manipulating other people into thinking a certain way. Like, if I'm going to be a journalist, I want my truth to be out there. And I realized how difficult it is in this society to actually do that, because I've always loved writing. So for the longest time, I was like, I was fortunate enough to get a scholarship to college. So I got a full ride to this beautiful private liberal arts school in Tahoe. And I asked my advisor, like, do I have to pick a major? Like, can't I just do the classes that interest
General
me
studies?
and
Yeah.
call it good? And he was like, yeah, you could, but then you'll be the only person to go through 4 years of college and not get a degree. And I was like, oh, okay. So I had a friend be like, well, what are you taking? Like, what are you interested in? I'm like, oh, religion, philosophy, like, sociology. She's like, you're a humanities major. And I was like, oh, that's a thing. So I found my niche and I learned. Oh, and my school was really cool. So my minor was outdoor adventure and leadership, and I got credit for going on backpacking trips and kayaking trips and winter camping, all these really cool expeditions. And I learned so much more in those trips than I did in any classroom at all, even though people always kind of laughed when I said that I was taking that in college. So I got a really well-rounded education, and I was really lucky because I had teachers tell me, like, don't believe everything that I say. Like, don't believe everything that anyone says. Like, think critically, think for yourself, and formulate your own opinions. And so that really helped to shape who I am as a person and my ethics and my values. And yeah, I'm really grateful for the education that I received. I think it's really rare to get that kind of education.
I was about to say, can you mention your college again? I'm curious.
Yeah, it's called Sierra Nevada College.
Really
It
nice
was
spot.
recently
Yeah.
it was recently taken over by the University of Nevada, Reno, so I don't know how much that's going to change the vibe there. But when I was going to school there were people like walking barefoot. My teachers would be like, "Oh, it's beautiful out today. Let's have class on the lawn." Like, it was a very low key hippie college, and I loved it a lot.
That minor is perfect for your Virgo Sun and Moon. And if you think about it, I mean, I'm an art history dropout, um, but largely it's like, oh, the psychology of why they were building these things or painting this, that, the other. Your psychology aspirations, even though you did a humanities degree, psychology and journalism, in a sense, storytelling and like talking about facts and reality is what tarot kind of is.
Yes,
Um, I mean, you get there anyway. So your interests have
absolutely.
obviously, yeah, been a thing. So, all right. So you graduated school. I mean, that time were you like doing psychedelics and going to raves, or were you just like you had abandoned Christianity, but you were still kind of straight edge, or how'd that work?
Oh, yes, yes, yes. I definitely started going to raves. I think I went to my first rave when I was 17. And I went to my first festival in 2012, Still Dream, which is very, very close to my heart and very influential in me figuring out who the heck I was. Okay, so here's another big part of my story that I didn't tell you guys yet. I
Right on.
was a child actress. So from
What?
the time that I was 5 years old until I was about 15, I was acting and modeling. So
Have we seen
10 to
your work?
15 10 to 15, I was like mostly modeling. If you, my big my big gig,
Yeah.
the thing that I'm like famous for, was being in The Wedding Planner when I was 6 years old with
I'm trying to
Jennifer
think about
Lopez
Steve.
and Matthew McConaughey.
Okay, so rom-com.
Yes, yeah, absolutely. That was my big role. I played a little girl pretending to be Jennifer Lopez's doctor, in the hospital scene, and I loved it. I had so much fun. So yeah, that was a big part of my life, especially in middle school. Like my mom was driving me down to San Francisco 2 or 3 times a week for auditions and modeling gigs. And then when I reached about 15, I was kind of in that in between age because I was mostly modeling at that time. And so I was too old to be like a kid model and I was too young to be an adult model. And there just wasn't a lot of work
It's not a
for that
demographic for
age.
puberty, right? Essentially, it's
Yeah,
like, yeah, we want discrete age groups, and you're morphing. So we'll talk to you later.
yeah,
It happens. That's still crazy
exactly.
as fuck, though. What the fuck is J Lo cool? I've heard she's not that nice.
When I met her, she was
She was
very
chick.
nice.
Okay.
Yeah, she was like her role in that scene was to be like laying in the hospital bed. And so I was like sitting on the hospital bed with her as this 6 year old, like, you're so beautiful. You're so nice. I want to be just like you when I grow up. Like, I just was totally fangirling over her. She was very sweet to me. Everyone always asks, oh my gosh, you met Matthew
See Jimmy
McConaughey. Did
from the
you
block.
think he was hot?
Oh,
And I'm
he's
like,
cool.
I was 6 years old.
Yeah, you were
I was actually not
pre-sexual.
interested in Matthew McConaughey at all. I just wanted to hang out with J-Lo. But he loved me. Every time he walked into the room, he would scoop me up in his arms and carry me around. So that was a very cool experience.
That's
And yeah,
crazy.
when I was 15, I basically had the choice of whether I wanted to continue down that path or whether I wanted to pull out. And I was kind of like burnt out from so much work. Um, I like to say, yeah, I've been working since I was 5 years old. That's a long time. So
Okay.
I was like, I think I'm gonna like be a teenager and just go to high school and take a break. And if I ever want to get back into it, I will. And I'm often very grateful that I didn't continue down that path. I often
You've
think about
chosen
how
wisely.
different my life would be. I honestly, if I'm going to be real with you, I have no doubt that I would have been one of those child actresses that went totally crazy in her early 20s and was all over the tabloids and yeah, because I was so overprotected as a kid and I had so much desire to experience all that life had to offer. So I very much could have been, you know, a Britney Spears scenario, which
No,
I'm so
no bueno.
grateful that she is free from her situation. But yeah, I have so much compassion for her because I'm like, that's where I would be if that's where my life had taken me.
It's always interesting to see. I mean, it's funny that you're saying you were a kid getting pictures taken of you, and that's the whole Lewis Carroll, let's just say,
Yes,
positive polarity thing, and not in a creepy way. But the it's an industry. I mean, people forget that. It's weird because it gets it's. I mean, I've never modeled or done any of that stuff, but it's like I can't imagine how that would fuck with a kid's self-image and just like value
yeah,
set. Like, you're like in a line with a bunch of kids who look like you, and you're told you're not good enough, or maybe you're the great one. Keep doing that, or else. Um, that would be a lot of stress. So I think you did choose wisely, in a sense.
yeah,
So good on you. I mean, it is what it is. I'm sure you'd be yourself either way in some weird way. But
Yeah, just because you're
uh,
opening the kind
yeah,
of worm, James. So, how would you say, to the degree that you can assess it, was it affecting you psychologically? It's always hard to tell, in this incarnation, it's kind of difficult to get the full experience of how would it be if it were different. So, what's the comparison like? But is there anything you would have noticed
absolutely.
for you, maybe, I don't know, positive or negative in your own psychology, or how you related to your friends, or how you saw yourself, or, self-doubt, or I don't know.
So the main thing that really affected me and kind of where I was getting at with this anecdote is that I felt like I had no idea who I really was growing up because I spent so much time as a kid being other people. acting, modeling, reading. I would take on the personalities of whatever character in whatever book I was obsessed with at the time. I loved to play with dolls. Like I had a very strong imagination, but I would always be other people, and I didn't feel like I had a strong idea of who the heck I really was. Um, and so that was the main thing. There was also, a lot of pressure and a lot of self-image things that I had to work through after that industry. And also a lot of control. Like that's a big difference of how my life is now. I'm a very big freedom person. I value freedom very much, probably because of the lack of it that I felt growing up. But we had to ask my agent before we did anything to my appearance. We had agents that wanted to cut my hair. When I was a kid, I had these like Shirley Temple ringlets, and some agents didn't think that was the look that they were looking for. And so, I know full well that if I was still in that industry, I would not have dreadlocks, I would not have tattoos, I would not have piercings, I would not have the freedom of self-expression that I value so highly now. So yeah, that was a big part of my life. And I'm actually just now starting to reintegrate those experiences with who I am now. I've discovered that I really like performing still. I really like being on a stage, and I've been experimenting with performing dancing for festivals and music events in the last half of last year. And I'm like, oh, this is still a part of who I am. I can just do it in a different way now. So, yeah, Still Dream Festival in 2012 was really the first time that I felt like I encountered who I was as a person. And that was a very powerful experience for me. When I was growing up, I was very much a misfit. I didn't feel like I fit in anywhere except for like with my little group of misfit friends. And I had a hard time because I didn't know who I was. I had a hard time like figuring out where I belonged. I never really felt that sense of belonging. And when I went to Still Dream for the first time, I not only felt like I belonged somewhere for the first time in my life, but I also felt like I was an important part of a community. Like I mattered to that community, like I was adding something. And that was a very powerful experience for me, and sent off almost a year period of going to a ton of festivals. And I've been working at festivals for the last 5 or 6 years. That's been my main source of income in the summertime. And yeah, was a
Are these
whole
like
new
conscious
world.
festivals, or is there a certain type of music you're going to typically, or how are you assessing your opportunities there?
Yeah, so I live in California, so my main, most of the festivals I'm going to are West Coast based festivals, and with various degrees of consciousness. So I've been to Lightning in a Bottle and Lucidity, which are very conscious, have lots of workshops. I've been to Emissions, which is like only West Coast based, like kind of the other end of the spectrum. Um, I've been working at Burning Man for the last 4 years, which is an incredible experience. So kind of all over the chart, but mostly surrounded around bass music and all mostly in California.
I mean, obviously, Burning Man is the kind of holy grail of festivals to people who are more psychedelic or interested in art and stuff. Um, to me, it looks like, I mean, I've never been in at this point. It's so commercial that I'm like, I don't know if I will go, and COVID and everything. So, I'm wondering if it looks like being in a Dali painting, kind of, I guess, or something like that. Like, how would you? Obviously, every festival has a different vibe and maybe elements that are pushing it in a certain direction energetically or whatever. But how has your experience been on the playa?
Yeah, that is such a beautiful metaphor, and I've never thought about it in that way, but you're so spot on with that. With that idea of like being in a Dali painting. Burning Man is really a different experience for a couple reasons. One, because it's a city.
Mhm.
So most festivals are like a very small like counterculture that have a certain kind of people that go there. Burning Man really has everything and every kind of person there. It's actually the Playa is the fourth Black Rock City is the fourth largest city in Nevada when it's going. And the military actually studies it to see how we can build a full functioning city and tear it down within such a short amount of time. And so I work for the commissary, which feeds all the people that are building the city. And so I've actually been out there for 6 weeks at a time and seen Burning Man be built from, you go out there and it's just desert. There's nothing out there except a handful of shipping containers and some little like flags to show where the things are going to be. And then watch the whole city be built, watch it become this thriving little mini metropolis of people with all of these funny little like nods to real life. Like for example, all the art cars have to go to the DMV to get registered, which is the Department of Mutant Vehicles, and they have to like all wait in line and like get checked out and fill out paperwork in order to be a part of the playa. So that kind of thing always makes me laugh. I'm like, oh yep, there's all the cars waiting in line at the DMV, like something's never changed, you know.
Exactly.
um and yeah, the idea of impermanence is another big part of Burning Man. Like, not only, I mean, all festivals have a certain amount of time that they are created for, but watching these incredible pieces of art that took months or even years to be created be burned to the ground really just brings you face to face with your own mortality and with your own ability to create and destroy. I once had a yoga teacher tell me that God is an acronym and it stands for generator, organizer, destroyer. And so I think that experiences like Burning Man really bring you intimately connected with that part of you that is able to create, that is able to organize, and that is able to destroy. And there's a lot of power in that.
It's cool that you like you're saying you've been on the front lines of the commissary thing. That's very Vergoan, very service oriented. But to see it gestate, like, from single cell to like baby to like the grave or whatever, that's pretty radical. The little, I forget what it's called, I guess Imagine Festival in Orcas Island, setting that up a little and watching it and being a part of it, it was very small, but that was stressful, so I can't imagine how much stress you must feel. Or but I've also seen satellite images of this thing, and it's like it is a sociological, like the military is going to study this and psychologists are going to study this, because there's something, I mean, it is like the definition of counterculture in a sense. It's going to take the best part of the world that they see and then regurgitate it in such a way that is so unique. Um,
Yeah.
Now you're making me want to go, but I'm like, I don't know when I would go or whatever. But because festivals, I don't know about you, especially when I'm like tripping or something. Like, man, a lot of numbers of people are overwhelming. Like, I'll hear people's thoughts. You've got
Oh,
a gray
yeah.
water type, so I'm sure you have these kinds of experiences.
Yeah.
It could be a little much. From just like, where's me? Where does it end? Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
Uh, it could be a lot. So, what are we could move on from Burning Man and stuff, but I'm kind of curious what like the best moment in your life there ever was, or like, and like something, not that the worst moment, but like something maybe funny or weird that happened. Doesn't have
So
to be horrific.
Burning Man is a place of extremes. That is
Right.
for sure. And so you do, like people always say, you're gonna have the best and worst moments of your life out on the playa. And I found that to be very true. And honestly, that's partly why I like working it because it gives you a structure. Like I have a shift to get to. I can go out and wander and get lost for a little bit, but then I have this like role to play and this like thing to come back to. It's rather overwhelming to be out there for 10 days and just be like, okay, go do your thing. So I've had I went to Burning Man once as a participant before I started working there, and I did attend the Renegade Burn this year, which was really awesome. So yeah, it's interesting because, you know, my experience of Burning Man is not quite like other people's experience of
That's
Burning
very
Man.
nice. Yeah.
I've celebrated 4 birthdays on the playa. So that in itself is a pretty special experience. Yeah, so that question of like anecdotes of like the best and worst times on the playa.
It's loaded. So if
Um,
it's not answerable, that's okay. Some things
yeah,
can't be bottled.
it's not an easy thing to answer because I have had some really tough experiences out there. One having to do with my relationship that I was in, and that was a bad experience out there. And then I've also, like, when you work at the commissary, this is one of the best experiences, but it wasn't even during the Burning Man event. But they have a event after the playa is over called the Last Supper, and that's when it's the last meal that we all enjoy on playa. And they ship in sushi, and we have stuffed quail, and they make this incredible fancy meal, and we all dress up in our best outfits and enjoy a meal and drink champagne and celebrate what we've created. And one year that landed on my birthday, and since I worked in the kitchen, all the kitchen guys knew me, and they like made me a special bottle of desert wine that they like fermented out there themselves and baked me a, and so it felt like that I had this huge party that was also kind of in celebration of me, and that was really special. um yeah, I could talk about one of my favorite art installations that I've ever seen too. That is a pretty cool aspect. Since I mentioned it, I'll just tell you. We
Yeah,
have
go for
time.
it. I won't stop you. Shit.
It was called the Head Maze, and it was out there in the last year that they had the official Burning Man. And it was this giant head on the playa. And it was actually kind of special because like we went up to go inside, and there was this big line waiting, and they were just telling everyone, okay, nobody else can come in for the day, like come back tomorrow. And so we went up to the guy and we're like, hey, we work for DPW, which is the Department of Public Works, and you know, like this is the only time that we have to check it out. And they were like, oh my gosh, I'm so sorry. We did not even realize, and just like ushered us in front of all the people, which is, you know, always kind of nice to get acknowledged and to get a certain privilege for your service anywhere. And this head was so cool because it had all these different rooms that were meant to be different areas of the mind. And so some of them were like a dusty attic room filled with books and board games and things like that. And then there was like this cozy room that was all pink and had like fuzzy pillows and stuff like that. And there was this one room that it started out kind of big and like got narrower as you walked into it, and it was painted black and white spirals, and it had all of these really disturbing facts about the planet and about extinction and different things like that written in the spirals. And I was like, I've been here in my mind so many times going down those rabbit holes. And that was it, just seeing it portrayed like that was so poignant. And then there was another room that like was really narrow, and it was painted all black, and it had all of these chains hanging from the ceiling, black chains. And so you had to like push your way through these heavy chains to get to the other side. And I've been in that space in my mind as well. So it was really cool to see someone's portrayal of mental illness and just the mental processes that we go through as humans. And to get to explore that in a physical sense.
That is dope. As within, so without. It's I mean, it's fun to kind of trip or meditate and go into these places, but to have it actualized and represented in a physical kind of stone and mortar way or whatever. That's pretty cool.
Yeah.
Raphael, I've been talking a whole lot. You have any questions thus far? We can start shifting gears into like your tarot and stuff. I'm pretty sure. I mean, you got to like 2012. That's not terribly recently. You've been doing all these festivals, and that's pretty much what you do in the summer. What do you do? I mean, I don't. It's not that I'm like when I say I don't care. It's not like about what you do as a job, but like what are you doing outside of the festival life, or is that just kind of merged into one thing now?
Yeah, so that was my main flow. I would do festivals in the summer and work at ski resorts in the winter.
Or
And that was really fun. I had a great time and I got a little burnt out. It was a pretty wild lifestyle. So now I am shifting into being a tarot reader as my job and really wanting to bring tarot reading to festivals and do festivals in that sense because I'm still really passionate about these places where we can gather and have the freedom to be our most authentic selves and to dream up solutions for the planet. And I have not seen very many, I've actually never seen another tarot reader at a festival, um, which I was really surprised about. And so, what I've been doing and what I've been working on is bringing tarot to festivals, teaching workshops, doing readings. And it's really beautiful because a lot of people will be like, I'll give them a reading and they'll be like, oh my gosh, this makes so much sense because yesterday I had this super synchronistic experience where all of these things were brought up. So it really helps people to integrate the experiences that they're having and actually know how to bring that into their lives when they go home rather than okay, I'm going to go home and keep living life as I have been and wait for the next event. So that's my goal is to bring tarot to festivals and teach workshops there and bring this art to help people have a more well-rounded experience. And
we're
yeah,
all about
that's
tarot
my
here, obviously. We're pulling cards and
main
shit.
gig.
So how do you interpret tarot? Sometimes I explain it to people like you're chopping up a comic book and we're projecting our story onto that, and you're going to see what you need to see. Sometimes people can get very woo about it, right? Where it's like almost like the Holy Spirit's guiding me to this card, and you see what I'm saying? It's like it can be
Yeah,
really practical or really magical and everywhere in between. So and you don't have
yeah.
to give like a definitive answer, but how are you processing the fool's journey and the whole situation there?
Yeah, so I do not mess with the future at all. I'll just say that first and foremost. I believe my highest responsibility as a tarot reader is to empower people to make their own destinies and to make choices that will guide their lives in alignment with what feels right for them. And so I would never, ever, ever take someone's power away by saying, this is going to happen to you. Um, So that's my first thing. I really focus on the present moment. To be truthful, I believe that tarot tells you what you already know. It helps
No,
you
true. Yeah.
cut through all the noise and all the societal expectations and the opinions of your mom and all of the outside noise. It helps you to like get past that and find your truth reflected back at you, see what you already know. And so my clients are always like, oh, well, I already knew that. And I'm like, yeah. And so now you know that you're right and you should follow what you
An
already knew.
affirmation. Yeah.
In my life, I was super indecisive growing up. Like, I could never make up my mind about anything. I always had other people decide what I wanted to eat, what I wanted to wear. Like, I just didn't have a whole lot of desire to choose my own path. And that might have been due to the way that I was raised as well, because I had a lot of my decisions made for me in a lot of ways. And so once I started working with the tarot, all of a sudden I was like, it was like gradual, not all of a sudden, it was gradual. But after a while of working with the tarot, I found all of a sudden that I did know what I wanted in my life. I did know what I wanted to eat. I did know what I wanted to do with my life. Did know who I was. And the more that I had these inner truths reflected at me through the cards, the more I was able to trust myself and be like, oh, actually, I've been giving away my power for years and letting other people make my choices for me. And now I don't have to do that. I can run that for myself and use the tarot as a modality to help me connect to that inner truth.
That's what's up. I'm curious, Raphael, and obviously Seeley. Sovereignty is a funny thing with tarot because I've had friends who like won't, I'll be like, should I trip today? And be like, oh shit, okay, yes, or like that kind of stuff. Where I am really kind of leaving it up to the cards, which I think is kind of a trust fall of sorts or whatever. But if you end up doing that too much, you really kind of relegate your power externally, which has its own,
Well,
its
I
own
had this
vibe. So
just very
yeah,
simply,
go for it.
and recently, I'm curious to what you say, see, but recently had this, and this is originally, let's say, a Bashar trick, but recently came up in a channeling did as well. Someone was like, yeah, I'm 50-50 on this, what should I choose, And it's the coin flip trick. And the same can be applied with tarot, because of course you can use tarot in a way to give you a yes/no answer. But even then I'm getting it. It says no, but I know I really want it. And then I will become conscious through the symbol of my own actual emotion and decision. So even then, if I keep that in mind and realize that no matter how many cards I'm laying out, the authority is still with me, then there's no pitfall there, I would say. See what I'm saying?
Yeah. Yeah, and if you believe that the guidance is coming from you, not from the cards, not even necessarily from the universe, which I do believe it is from the universe, but from the part of the universe that is in me, if that makes sense, because I am universe as well. So I really think that, the guidance is coming from you. So you are ultimately the source of wisdom, no matter what, no matter how you're interacting with the cards. I've actually thought about that a lot because I've started working with a pendulum as well because tarot's not great at yes or no answers.
It's harder
And
for sure.
sometimes I'll be like, hanging my pendulum and I'll be asking a question and then an answer will come to my mind. I'll be thinking yes or I'll be thinking no. And obviously the pendulum will reflect that. And at first I was like, am I just influencing the pendulum to do what I want it to? But then I realized, well, no, because the guidance is coming from within me. So of course I already know what the answer is. That's my intuition letting me know, hey, you already know what you want. You can get this validation from this external thing, but it's still coming from you. So I still find that it helps me to embody that sovereignty.
I mean, it's like any story. I mean, this is why Disney is so powerful, or, any Pixar or whatever, because we have a super adept ego that is trying to filter out so much, and these kind of symbols and stories can kind of cut through that at a level, to where you're just resonating on an archetypal level, and it's getting beyond your boundaries that are more kind of inculcated through culture and stuff. It's always funny. I mean, I'm curious how you got into tarot. I was not into it really at all, and then I basically had this like 1 or 2 week tryst with this girl who was a lot younger than me at the time. She was 18, and I was like 28. And she called me a few weeks later, or months later, and was like, oh shit, hopefully this isn't a bad call, like pregnancy or something. But she was like, I've actually become a Jehovah's Witness or something crazy. Do you want all my occult shit? And she had this zombie tarot deck, and I was kind of like, all right, why not? And I started messing with it. To me, as an art history dropout, it's all about the art, really. I
Right.
have a lot of decks, like the Starman tarot deck. I mean, this is dope art to me. It's not necessarily. I just got my first Rider-Waite because Amazon or PayPal was like, here's $15 for free, and I was like, okay, I guess I'll get a borderless Rider-Waite. So I just got that, and I think actually there's a lot of validity in Rider-Waite. I'm not sure if you've seen it. I'll send you a link. Send you a link. It's 21 Faces of God. It's a really good major arcana documentary, kind of focusing on the cultural relevance of music and movies and stuff, kind of using a lot of symbology to explain the fool's journey through a Rider-Waite lens. In any event,
Just because you bring it up, Jim, I highly recommend it
Mhm.
because a dear friend of mine was asking about, where to get, good information on tarot. All I'm finding is like these superficial BS explanations. And I'm sending her the link from you. and immediately it was like, I only watched 20 minutes and it's exactly more than
It's crack.
what I wanted.
Yeah.
It's perfect, so greatly recommended, highly recommended.
It's like 2.5 hours. I want to get the guy Robert Bonomo. He has 21 Faces of God, which is like this really kind of like, I mean, it's almost like a Gnostic sojourn. I mean, even to the point where it's like talking about Kabbalah and be like, you got to be 42 to even do this shit. Like, I mean, it's getting a little weird.
I mean,
It's not dogmatic by any
I'd like
means.
to recommend one other series, which is called, I think, The Path of the Fool by Michael Tessarian. The only unfortunate thing is that this is not online anymore. So it's
It
behind a
happens.
paywall, basically. I think it's on
Oh,
unslaved.com.
Michael,
But yeah,
gotta
no,
pay those
good
bills, I
stuff.
guess.
No, it was public, but I can also understand some people eventually choosing to, draw some
Privatize.
boundaries in a sense. But yeah,
Sure.
there's some great documentaries that really go in depth, much more than superficial half-page descriptions and so on.
I threw away the Rider-Waite Tarot booklet, like with this deck. I was like, this is shit. Like, I get it's original, but I was like, I got it, like through other stuff. Alejandro Jodorowsky has a good book. I haven't read it, but he's got the whole Holy Mountain situation going on. But I'm kind of curious, and Rafa, I don't know if I've ever heard this. How did you guys, like, what was your first deck like? How did you get, what was the thing that turned you on? Because at first I was like, I'm just going to pull a card for the beginning and middle and the end of the day. And then at the end of the day, kind of see if it jived. Be like, is this what I experienced? And it became uncanny enough that I was like, I'm in a story and I'm reading my, like, what is life? Or, it got really weird kind of quick. So what got you into it like that? Because I doubt your mom was getting you that for Christmas back in the day or whatever. So yeah.
So it's a good question. I was, for some reason, probably you can read that in my astrology, never completely dismissive of religion or occultism, even though I wasn't, brought into any particular system, church, or denomination or anything. So I guess I got a deck at like 17 or something, but it was a Thoth deck, which is, great, very, great art and so on, but completely, how should I say, at least the pictures themselves unrelatable unless you really have good, get good insight and occult knowledge. At least if I look at them now, For me now,
it's a fairly esoteric deck.
For me now, the Rider-Waite actually is the most, easily symbolically understandable, let's say, that has the easiest progression. Oh, you have a cat? Is it a cat or a dog? See?
It's a dog.
It's a dog. Oh,
This
nice.
is Luna. Yeah, this
Oh,
is my baby
nice.
Luna.
Nice.
Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah, so I was introduced to the tarot actually first by my best friend, that I've known since high school, Kat, and she's a nurse and she is a very scientifically minded. She's very much like she believes in things after they've been proven to her through her experience. And she started reading tarot. She was working with the Wild Unknown deck, and she lived in Ireland at the time. I was still living here, and I would call her when I was having issues in my life, and I would be like, Kat, I need a reading. And so she would pull cards for me and give me phone readings. And she told me when she first started talking about the tarot that, she was like, I've experienced so much through nursing that I can't deny that energy is real. And she's like, I don't know how it works, but I know it's a thing. So that was kind of my first intro. And then I got an Oracle deck. I started out with Oracle because I was kind of scared of tarot because I did think that it was all
I fuck with
future
mostly
based.
Oracle. I'll be real. Like, tarot is cool,
Yeah.
and I think it's like the holy grail in a sense, but Oracle cards are just as helpful.
Yes, totally. But I was more afraid that like I
Get it
would
wrong.
create self-fulfilling prophecies or something like that. So it was there was a lot of resistance there for me to begin working with the tarot. So after a while of working with Oracle decks and seeing the way that those improved my life and my intuition, I finally felt ready. I was just like, okay, I want to check out tarot. I want to see what this is all about. And I got they say that you're not supposed to get your own tarot deck, but I think that we take control of our lives. And if we want something, we should go get it. So I got the Fountain Tarot as my first deck, which looking back, that was not an easy deck to learn with. It's very artistic. Each card is like a mini masterpiece. Really beautiful artwork. but it doesn't have the clear symbology like the Rider-Waite. And like you, Jim, I didn't actually get a Rider-Waite deck until I had already been working with the tarot for years. And I don't actually read with it very much. I think because I don't relate to
Yeah.
the art that much. I love it and I respect it and I use it for reference all the time, but I don't necessarily I like
Yeah.
more modern contemporary decks that kind of reflect how I see the world, rather than this kind of old-fashioned way of looking at things. But I have a lot of decks that I work with, and I do believe that I kind of think of tarot as like a language, and each deck is like a different dialect, or each reader has its own dialect, and each deck has its own interpretations of each card. So,
She loves you.
I know she's a good girl.
Yeah, she looks
Um,
like a great daughter.
so, yeah, each time I interact with a new deck, I learn so much more about these universal archetypes in seeing it through these different lenses.
I was gifted a Thoth deck when I was in Australia. I left it there with the original, not intentionally. I thought I was actually going to go back, but I didn't. Because of COVID, largely. But other reasons too. So I left that the zombie tarot deck was the first one. It was like this really kitschy kind of weird art, and it was always the art for me. I think I don't know why. I mean, maybe it's 12th house Mercury stuff, but I feel like a picture says 1,000 words kind of thing. So, and it's weird because Rider-Waite was cutting edge tech at one point. I mean, that was like, oh my god, who's doing all this? But it's so that's not archaic in a bad way, but it's so ingrained that I think there's next levels. Um, just like I don't know, music festivals evolve and people evolve. So it's fascinating to see where these things are going. In a way, it's tricky. I don't know how you feel. I think some people, how do I put this? It's a democratized situation in that anybody can do it. I really think anybody can kind of pull a card and have fun with it. But I think some people have the shine more than others. I think you would probably be one of those people, but just because of your chart, I'm looking at it, it's like you got a lot of water. You're going to be pretty in tune with a lot of stuff intuitively. So, what is your opinion? Like, how do you approach that in your own mind? Like, do you think like I'm not usually telling people go get decks, although it's obvious that I'm enthusiastic about it, so I hope they find joy in it. But it's almost a little like psychedelics, where it's like everyone should probably get stoned at some point in their life. Acid's maybe not for everybody. DMT is
Yeah,
like you know what I mean? It's like that, where it's like holy shit, like you gotta really want it.
yeah.
What is your advertising kind of modality in terms of that? How democratic are you with it? Are you bigoted like me, thinking there's muggles and wizards, or like how are you feeling about it?
I definitely think, I would say that a muggle is someone that hasn't been awakened to their inner wizard.
We're
I
all
think
muggles at some point.
we all have an inner wizard. Some people never have the pleasure of accessing it, and that is tragic. Um, I am someone who believes that there is magic everywhere in the world. Um, so yeah, I definitely believe that everyone has the ability to tap into that. And I think that everyone has a different way of accessing that part of themselves. It might not be tarot for everyone. I do think that we all have an intuition. We all have multiple senses, and it's important to access those parts of ourselves because otherwise we're like walking blind,
Going
when
through the
you're
motions
missing
of
a
life.
sense.
Yeah,
Um, you're doing kind of a disservice to yourself, and missing out on something that can really help you in your human experience. So, yeah, however people are able to access their intuition, I think it's important that they do so. And I think it could be through many things, through meditation, through animals or colors, through synchronicities, through um, other psychic ventures, through dreams. We all have situations in our lives when we encounter that part of ourselves. So it's just about finding the way that works for us the best in order to continue to return to that inner world.
that's what's up. Yeah, I mean, I don't think there's a right or wrong answer. I'm just kind of curious because I think sometimes people with any kind of occult knowledge. I mean, the whole thing is hidden. This like only you're an elect get in, or you've got to be initiated. And in some weird way, I think that's true. Just I've never done ayahuasca, but I don't think just giving it to anybody willy nilly is probably a great idea. But at the
Yeah.
same time, it's a weird, and this is where I'm like, we're always talking about this in the podcast. It's like, am I naive to think everything's working out to the glory of God or whatever? It's like it's all good, but then there's some paths that are like less helpful, I guess. Like
Yeah.
Luke didn't have to lose an arm necessarily in Star Wars. He could have, done a little different. Um, so kind of shifting gears, Ganesh is behind you. I know Raphael's got probably a similar tapestry facing, what he's facing, as I recall. What's the story there with you? I mean, we were talking about it recently. There's a mouse. There's a lot of little symbology going on with Ganesh that is not something that I know much about. I'm not particularly steeped in Hindu mythology. So, and if you're not, that's cool. If it's just a design element, all good. I don't even care. Like I'm not, making sacred geometry tapestries, and there's one behind me. What is the significance of any of the remover of obstacles behind you?
Yeah, great question. Honestly, I have this tapestry. It was a gift from a partner of mine many years ago. I
It's
know
dope
a
art.
little
I
bit
mean, bottom line.
about Ganesh or Janessa. I just learned that the way it's pronounced in India is Janessa.
Oh, so I'm totally
Um,
fucking it up always.
I don't
Great.
know that much about this system of deities, to be honest, but I do have respect for all of the different faiths and beliefs and deities, and I find inspiration from all of the different symbols and cultures. And so I think it's just for me, it's a way of staying connected to um, the rest of the
Magic.
world, Yeah,
Yeah.
staying connected to the magic in the rest of the world, absolutely. You mentioned something earlier about the fool's journey. Can I tell you what my take is on that?
Definitely. Totally.
For sure. Okay.
You got it.
So
That's what's up.
I, um,
Full
yeah,
shot.
I've
All that.
been thinking a lot about the Fool's Journey recently over the last few months, and I feel like I've really come to a deeper understanding of what it is. And I think my interpretation of it basically is like we are these expansive souls, like these universal beings that have incredible amounts of wisdom. And so I think to me, like the journey of the fool is basically us as this like huge expansive soul being like, okay, I want to have an earthly experience. I want to learn what it is to be a human and have these emotions and learn these lessons. And in order to do that, I have to forget everything that I've already known and squeeze myself into this tiny human body that's so limited and be born anew. And so that to me is like the beginning of the fool's journey is like us leaping off of this cliff from our universal spirit into a human body and forgetting everything that we know and then relearning along the way, remembering who we are through that journey, through the major arcana. And the world, when we reach the end of the cycle, the world is really like embodying what we came here to do, because I do believe that each of us had some sort of purpose or intention that we set when we decide to have a human experience. And so I think that when you reach the world, you remember what you came here to do, and you are living that out in the human realm, in the earthly realm. And it's really interesting because I work with birth and year cards. And so my year card, my card of the year, is the world. And I've been pulling the world and the fool like crazy since this beginning of the new year. So I feel like that's really where I'm at in my journey of self realization and really living out my purpose on this planet. And I think that's really powerful.
Well said. I mean, yeah, it's I don't know. I mean, I don't presume you're into anime, but Raphael turned me on. We had an episode on Neon Genesis Evangelion. Is that right? Yeah. We watched all the movies, watched the shows from. I was like, what the fuck? If you've never seen that shit, it's on Netflix. It's Narnar. It's next level. But it's basically about Kabbalistic apotheosis, which is essentially the world card, where you're just like, I am the whole thing. It is me. It's through me.
Yeah,
Anything
I'm
I ever saw as
almost
an enemy
thinking,
or
see,
all
the
that. Go
way
ahead.
you described it is because I would also have said until now the whole point is just as you described it, but then the world card being once again recognizing oneself as the world. So recognizing oneself as the world, however, the way you put it is almost like realizing oneself as the world, in a sense that whatever you chose yourself to, what process you went through, there is also a type, even though this gets very psychedelic quick, I think, but a type of transferent of whatever essence you chose to bring to this particular scenario of a planet. And eventually also that has to, seep out of you or get imprinted onto the world, whatever this is. So it's almost like probably two cycles. For many, unfortunately, the first one, get reminded again that it's all you, which we are taught to forget, and then do it again and, make that transference happen. Maybe, yeah. So make your effect obvious for all to see, in a sense, and not even because it has to happen, or how should I say, because it's like a big chore or anything, but just because that's the process of an incarnation, something automagic.
Yeah.
I was walking my brother's fiance now. He's proposed to her, a girlfriend of 2 years. They just got back from Europe. I'm like, oh yeah, they're getting married now. I was walking the dog earlier today, and it's like it's so weird because it takes. I mean, it's trippy, I guess, in a sense. But if you do these expansive drugs or meditation, I mean, it doesn't even have to just be through psychedelics. But if you do enough mindfulness, I guess is the thing, and get outside of yourself in a certain way. I was walking around being like, oh wow, I am this environment. Like my conditions are this condition right now in a sense. It's like, okay, so how far does that go? Is it this 5 feet? Is it like how Joey, this dog, is doing, and me, like we're in this vibe? Where it doesn't end. It's this, it just goes the whole way out, and in some quantumly entangled weird way, um, the world is a stage, and we are but players. But it's like we're directors doing cameos or something. It's a really weird trip. Um,
That's
and
a nice way
I
to put it. Directors doing cameos, I like it.
but I don't know. It's weird because we forget that, but then I think you can get almost like high on that thought, and it's like hard to function at that level. You're a Virgo. I mean, it can become very impractical if you're just like, namaste, all is one. I am high on 10 strip or whatever, mode. Um, it's like hard to bring that back into like reality. I think maybe Burning Man is this weird halfway point where it's like it's very dosed and psychedelic and crazy, but at the same time they're gonna feed you. You're wearing clothes, probably most people. You're wearing some form of garment, and you're functioning as a biological entity in this terra firma. You know what I mean? It's like so it's this weird cross of matter kind of thing. I mean that's the whole point of Hangman, I guess, in some way, where it's like, holy shit, uh these white blood cells raging inside of me against viruses, that's me. And then I guess the Milky Way is me, Stardust and all this stuff. It's not news to you, but it just it's a perplexing situation how to get that kind of grandeur and awe. I mean, I think that's some of the magic that's been missing in religions a lot. I mean, it's one thing to get, go to a church service, as you well know, because this is basically what's happening. I'm not even discrediting the validity of spirituality and Christian belief and all this stuff, but basically, people are going to go listen to Third Day and stuff, get turned on to a frequency of entertainment, hopefully at worst entertainment, but like they're trying to alter their consciousness. I mean, that's the whole point. It's like, okay, we're going to do a ritual, like this is the sacrament, or we're going to sing a song. And I mean, especially if you were like serious about Christianity, you can get into places where you're moved by the Spirit in such a way that it's like irksome, and it's just like, holy shit, I'm in this bitch, and it's all happening. um
Yeah.
Maybe tarot and astrology and some of these things can remagic I don't even know the right word, kind of bring the spirit that has been dormant for a long time in reality, because patriarchy's gone so far in certain directions that, like, all people think about is like their crypto, or which is fine, but we need to remember that we're in a dream, like walking in a dream in some weird way. And then we do have tools to like kind of anchor. I'm binging Lost. I used to live in Honolulu, so I've seen it before. But I was just like, oh, I'm probably not going to watch a whole lot of TV anymore, so I might as well binge all this stuff. Don't ask. So I'm like, all right, I got to watch Lost, and it's just like it's very much like that, where everybody's just telling stories with each other, and it's this kind of orgy of story in a weird way. We talked about it yesterday on the podcast with some people about touch, and they were talking about tantra, and if you've had the epiphany, it's cool, but it's hard to translate. It's like everything's fucking. Everything is polarity interchange. Everything is like cycling and going through this thing. So my hope is that having conversations like this shows people that we're not that crazy, and it's a real Narnia door if you want to go through it. You're not going to go to hell or anything like that. And that these are practical tools. I think that's really the biggest
Yeah.
part. That it's not just so much like I've got to go to the jungle and talk to a shaman stuff necessarily, though
Yeah.
that could be on one's path. This is like just shuffle things and kind of sit there and sit in your mind and focus on an idea, and you're going to quantumly entangle with that at a participatory level in such a way that, like you said, you're going to guide yourself.
Yeah.
So it's cool that you're doing it. I appreciate that you're trying to shift it into professional gear. I mean, I give readings, but basically it's like toss me some crumbs and we'll call it energetic even or whatever. I hope you can, sustain with that. Is there anything we haven't talked about or that you want to talk about? We can kind of start shifting gears to closing down. I know Raphael is not wide awake in Vienna, Austria. It's a little later there. Although he's not affected by this, he would say. But I try to be cognizant towards the end of these podcasts. It's like, okay, he's probably getting tired.
Yeah.
So what are your plans? Where can people find you? What are some of your goals for the year? Stuff like that. Projects you're part of, etc., etc.
Yeah, I'm happy to share about that. I'd love to just touch on a couple of the things that you just said. First of all, I feel like what you said about like realizing that we're all in a dream, that's really how I see the sword suit. I think the journey of the swords, and to help me understand the sword suit, I like to take off the first S and I think of it as words. It's our story, it's our beliefs, it's like what we choose to narrate through our lives. And so we like, it's that journey of awakening to the fact that we are in a dream and becoming lucid in the dream and
It's like
taking
never ending
control
story, right? We're like, holy
of,
shit, I'm reading this.
Then
And I'm not.
please,
yeah,
as we
and
speak
really
of the
becoming
swords,
lucid.
tell us
Yeah.
about the interpretation, because one of the, I think, funniest card, or I mean, if I'm saying funniest, most interesting cards, tell us about the Ten of Swords. So what
Ooh,
happens at the end in the Rider-Waite, of course, when the guy is lying on the beach,
It's a
10
Gemini
swords in his
card.
back? Yeah. Oh, really?
yes.
It's a gem. Oh, this explains a lot. So kindly, or maybe just briefly outline how you see the process of the swords and especially the 10. What's your interpretation? Because the image on the Rider-Waite by some could be interpreted as quite gruesome. So I'm curious as to what you think.
Yeah, totally. And since we've been talking about the Rider-Waite so much, I'd love to just give credit to Pixie Smith, who was the artist of this deck. She was queer, she was colored, she was amazing. And she doesn't get a whole lot of credit for her work, which is so iconic in this culture. So to me, the Ten of Swords is that ultimate awakening and reclamation of our power to write our own story. I see those swords as the beliefs and the narratives that we've been told by people around us, and those wounds, those swords in our backs have been in there for so long, it's like we forgot that they were even in there. And so it can be really painful to dig in and say, oh, wait, that doesn't belong to me. That never belonged to me. And pull these swords out of our consciousness. And so I think the sword, the best analogy I have is like a pen or even our tongue. They say that the pen or your word is a double-edged sword. That's how I really view the sword suit. And so it's really taking that weapon, taking that power back into our own hands and saying, okay, I'm done with that story that was told for me, and it's my chance to make my own story. It's my chance to write this narrative. And that's why we have the rising sun in the background, because it's like a blank page. It's our chance to like start over and have us be in the driver's seat of our lives and of our consciousness. So it's a really powerful transition.
Yeah, I would agree. And last thing to mention is what is happening, because he's not, in some kind of medieval castle or somewhere or at a market or whatever, but he's lying on the beach. And most likely, what's the next thing that's going to happen? There will be the rising tide and all that, overly defined concrete negative belief system, self-limitation, is just getting reabsorbed into the unity of all consciousness, you know? At least that's the way I like
Yeah.
to see it. So there's always a new cycle, you know? This is not the end, because many people, you know, they're scared of the death card and so on,
Yeah.
which usually actually can be very positive if, you know, the charge is transformed in the appropriate way.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's a really beautiful way to look at that. And yeah, I do think that these tools are so accessible with helping us learn about who we are and relate to the world around us. And really, like you said, they kind of erase that um, that gateway, that gatekeeper between us and the spiritual or the occult. You know, it's not like we have to go to some priest or hierophant to give us the sacred knowledge. It's tools that we can use to reclaim our own connection with spirit. So I'll leave it with that. And I'd love to tell you about all the exciting things that are coming up for me this year. I have a website coming out in early February. I'm super excited about it. You can check out the sneakiest peek at deepseatarot.com and sign up for my email list, and you'll be the first to know when it goes live. I'm really excited about having a place online to put my essence and all of my wisdom and projects and events in one place. Um, Another exciting project that I'm working on that I haven't actually told anyone else about yet. I'm
Secrets of the
working
Moon.
on
Watch out.
Don't worry, we won't tell anyone.
Yeah.
yeah. I'm working on an oracle deck with
Fuck
a
yeah.
art collective in Portland. So they are going to give me a collection of art, and I get to divine the meanings and write the guidebook for it, which is such an honor and such an exciting project to work on. I am also obsessed with art. That's another reason why I love tarot. Art and storytelling is my jam, and so the idea of getting to interact with art in this way and really allow the divine guidance to flow through me for each of those art pieces is something I'm very stoked about. So
Rightly
that's going to
so.
be
Oh
coming
yeah.
out probably in the springtime. What else is coming
We're
up?
obviously gonna have to do an episode on that at some point, just for the record. It's like
Yeah,
once that's out,
I would love
April, be like,
to.
"What's up? Show us your cards. Talk about how this came about." Because that
Yeah,
whole process is fascinating. Like you said, Pixie. I didn't realize her gender political persuasion and stuff. I just knew that the chick didn't get much credit, and she made the art, and like the guy, writer was the guy who wrote or Wait or whatever. It's Writer Wait
yeah.
something. I forget. It's on my deck that I just got. It's like her name's on there, but I'm like, oh yeah. I didn't mean to interrupt you. So projects, continue.
Yeah, so that's also very exciting. I'm also going to be doing in the springtime. I haven't exactly landed on a date yet, but I'm going to be doing a tarot journey. So it's going to be a 4-week program where we're going to be using the tarot and meditation and journaling and group sessions to really dive into the idea of self love and really being your own soulmate. So this year is a lover's year. The card of the year is the lovers. And for me, that's really more about falling more deeply in love with myself through the reflection of my experience and my relationships and the world around me. And personally, in my own life, I've been going through a big journey of I kind of grew up really in love with the idea of the fairy tale of like finding the one, and that was my obsession for many years. And in the last year, I just removed myself from an almost 6-year relationship. And after doing that, I really realized, like, oh my gosh, I'm the one. Like, I'm the one that's going to be by my side for the rest of my life, no matter what. I'm going to be the one that's going to be there in sickness and health until the day I die. And so I need to work on having a really solid, beautiful relationship with myself and really supporting myself in the way that I need to be supported. So I'd love to help other people in that journey as well. And I think it's really important. I think it's one of the biggest themes of this year. And I've heard that reflected in the people around me. So you can stay tuned for that as well by signing up for my email list on my website. It's going to all have all the information on there. And other than that, I'm going to be doing some local festivals and events, doing tarot for those. And yeah, just I like to do seasonal offerings. I like to create different spreads to help us along with whatever cosmic and earthly energies are affecting us at any given time. So that's where I really put my passion and my creativity into my offerings. So I
Word.
think that's about everything.
Got a pretty busy, fun year ahead, it seems. So props,
Yeah, I'm
Gemini, Libra
excited.
stars, make it
Thank
work, my
you.
guy. Yeah, dude, thanks for coming on. I know, like, we now know who you are. I'm glad Neon suggested you. You're cool as fuck. So,
Thank
definitely team Rabbit
you.
Hole. We'll have to get you back on when the deck comes out. Maybe get you on with some other people. I'm just thinking, it'd be fun to just shoot shit about tarot. I'll send you a link to that 21 Faces thing because I think you'll dig that.
Please
Otherwise,
do.
yeah, are there any kind of parting sentiments? It doesn't have to be like, a golden nugget of epitaph worth or, like the biggest point ever. You could say meaningless, whatever. You could say a cool point, whatever. But so no pressure is my point. But is there anything you kind of want to leave people with in terms of just, you know, an idea of inspiration or something that you think they should think about, etc.?
Yeah, I mean, like I was just talking about, it's a lover's year, and I think the most important thing is falling more deeply in love with yourself, recognizing your own power, finding the ways that you're giving that away and reclaiming it, and having a lot of compassion for yourself because we've all been through so much in the last couple years.
Yeah.
And this is what I want to say. We are in such an incredible time on the planet. We're really like on the threshold of the old world and the new world. Like this technological age is so crazy and I can barely wrap my mind around it, but like this is a huge turning point for this planet. I really believe that there is a huge evolution of consciousness that's happening right now. And so if you're here on this planet right now alive, like you are exactly where you're meant to be and the earth needs you to be here and to offer all that you are because you're critical in this evolution. You're exactly where you're meant to be. So just do what you got to do to keep being here.
So what's up? Yeah, trust the process,
Yeah,
basically. Guys, they're
and
out
yourself.
there. We are all, find the others, the whole Timothy Leary thing, but like that's what Team
Yeah.
Our Model's all about. So I'm glad that we know you're out there. People will figure out how to contact you and follow your journey, and we'll get you back on here at some point. So thanks for giving us your time and energy. Yeah, guys, find the fucking others. They're out there. They exist. You'd be
Awesome.
surprised.
Yeah, you can also find me on Instagram at Deep Sea Tarot. I'd love if you guys give me a follow. I share lots of fun things about life and tarot on there. So yeah, so great to meet you both. You're also both super dope. I can't wait to continue having deep conversations, diving through the rabbit hole. Thank you for what you're doing.
Well, hopefully your first podcast wasn't horrifyingly bad. You're getting back on that celebrity wagon. J-Lo, watch out. So
I had a great time. I could talk for 3 more hours, so
oh, that's how it
we're all
works.
good.
I mean, trust we already did a podcast before this, and I think Raphael did one before that, and we've got one at like 8 in the morning my time tomorrow. It's crazy sometimes, but it is what it is. So
Yeah.
anyway, thanks for
Yeah,
giving
but
us
we'll
your
get you
energy.
back. Thank you so much for
Yeah.
sharing your story and all those, synchronicities and insights. And yeah, what I think we're gonna do eventually, we're just gonna do some tarot roundtable because we have a few tarot readers ultimately. Brian also just released his new decks. And yeah, we gotta promote all the new cool creative decks coming out and all the
Yay.
Tools available.
divination, make all the tools available, to those that feel themselves responsible enough to be using them. So yeah.
Beautiful.
It's a gateway
Thank
drug,
you.
kids. Watch out. Tarot
Yeah.
is like the. My mom's getting
Most
into
certainly.
Enneagram right now. I'm like, that's like soft. Like, okay, Enneagram's cool, but like, get into astrology, get into tarot. Anyway, thanks again for coming on, and we'll talk to you later.
Thanks again, and
All right.
thank you, and thanks everyone for listening and watching. Catch you all next time.
Thank you. Bye.